started. There we go. So my name is Abby Greer. I'm in Kent, Ohio. I am a longtime time banker and a team member at timebanks.org. And also here helping with this call. And as I call your name, I'd like you to wave. I think you'll probably be on the top of the screen, at least for me. So everybody can see who you are, as we're all really one big time bank family. Pam Del Campo, there she is waving. Eric Bachman, there he is. Our executive director, Krista Wyatt. Yes, thank you, Krista. And of course, we have Christine Gray, if you would wave, and Edgar Cahn. So the town hall calls provide a space for all Time Bank members to foster connectivity through sharing each other's stories. When we share our stories, we are moving the movement and creating a more global community. We hope to provide a safe place to share our thoughts and dreams, and where everyone is welcome and heard. This town hall call is the 5th of a series of calls that celebrates time banking's core values. As we know, our core values are traits or qualities that are not just worthwhile, they actually represent time banking's highest priorities, deeply held beliefs, and provide a foundation for building our communities. Today, we'll be discussing our 3rd core value. For many of us, it's our favorite, reciprocity. We do ask that we are all respectful of the fact that we're a group on the call seeking to share with and learn from the whole group, and to be respectful of each other's time. In the same spirit, please do not use the call as an opportunity to recruit others to take action with you. If you are a coordinator of a time bank seeking knowledge about managing a time bank, we suggest you join the Time for All Time Bank, which is a global time bank for coordinators, and also hosts a monthly coordinator call where we center on specific topics regarding managing a time bank. So I think Krista just added that to the chat. If you're not a member, we'd love to have you. We're sharing time credits and all kinds of amazing members are there. Also, please know we've muted everybody. And after we hear from Edgar and Chris, we'll be opening the call for your stories, comments, and/or thoughts. You will need to unmute yourself. We've all been doing Zoom, so we all have a little more patience when it comes to that. And we ask that if you're going to share a story, please keep it to 2 minutes or less. I know that can be difficult, but if for some reason our call ends before we can hear your story, we welcome you back in September, where we will also be discussing the core value reciprocity, and we really want to hear your story. So please bear with us. An hour is a short time. It's already 4:08. And now I will be turning the call over to Chris Gray, who will facilitate all of the sharing we'll be doing. Chris, it's all yours.
Hello, thank you. Thank you, Abby. And thank you all so much for being here. We are again looking forward to hearing from all of your stories. And today is Reciprocity Day. So I'm just going to say a little word about reciprocity that somebody shared with me the other day. We were talking about the 5 core values, and the person said to me, reciprocity is my favorite. It's like the hamburger in the middle of the buns. So it's right in the middle of the 5 core values. And it has many, 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 many implications. So we'll be exploring those and hearing them from your stories, how reciprocity plays out in so many different ways. And to start us off with that, we are going to go to Edgar. So Edgar, some first thoughts on reciprocity.
First thoughts, the focus on reciprocity comes from an attempt to counter all the systems of social services which deliver services to people, which define them by what they lack by ways in which they're deficient, but do not honor them for the capacities they have and do not provide them with an opportunity to show how great they are or to weave their own connections. And I thought all of this one-way giving just perpetuates subordination, perpetuates sexism, racism, treatment of people as inferior, and defines them by what they lack and what they need. And we're about saying people are miracles. We're about saying, isn't it extraordinary that a human being can come out of the womb and actually be able to talk and think and communicate? Isn't that a miracle? And can't we celebrate that? And can't we find a way to amplify that? Now, money tends to reward what you do, not what you receive. But time banking says there's an obligation when you receive something to pay it forward. Some mothers may know that they've carried a child for 9 months, and maybe they would like a pay it forward dynamic built into that 9-month process, because it's universal and it's the way in which we really build community. So for me, reciprocity was the most important new thing we brought in, because all the foundations were funding people who give, who are professionals, who deliver services, but none of them were rewarding the people who receive the services and give back. But you can't have democracy if people won't give back. You can't have equality. You can't have the feminist revolution. You can't have all the revolutions we've seen if you don't enlist as partners the people whom you're helping. And if all they are is defined by what they lack, by what they need, by how you're helping them, then they're not going to feel that they matter. And this is about a revolution that says everybody matters. And so for me, reciprocity is the most important of the core values, because it turns everything on its head and it says, no, we're here. And so I'm not going to keep talking, but I see people whom I've seen, and it's such a joy just to be connected, but not to know you. If you don't speak, I can't know you. I'm just looking at you. So I need to ask you to pay back by speaking up and just sharing one thing you've done, one thing you've looked at, one thing you've, one friend you've reached out to, because all of you are special, and I need to know how special you are. I need to know more about you than just what you look like.
Okay, thank you so much, Edgar. So yes, in a moment we'll be opening up those, opening up this call, this town hall for your stories. Let me just say a couple of things first. We have very little time. We keep this to an hour, and that hour goes whizzing by. So just to reiterate what Abby said about if you could keep your stories sort of somewhat short, and we've got a system going, which we're trying. We're trying to get this system so it's just right. So what we ask you to do, if you've got a story to share, would you put it in the chat, and just story to share, or want to share, or like to share, and Abby will keep track of that. But meanwhile, when somebody shares a story, we know that sometimes it brings up immediate thoughts. So I will be looking and seeing if anybody really has something they really want to say to that story. Would you put up your hand? I'll be looking out for those hands raised, either physically or on the screen thing. And we'll take 1 or maybe 2 comments on a story, and then we'll go to the next person in the line that Abby is capturing in the chat. Does that make sense to everybody? You can wave if it does. I hope it does. I hope it does. Great, great, great. Okay, so I hope that while I've been talking, maybe somebody has put in that they would like to share a story about reciprocity, and Abby can start that chain in motion.
Thank you, Chris. So far, we only have Donna who would like to make a comment, but before we invite Donna to this comment, because I'm pretty sure as I look around this group of people, there are lots of stories about reciprocity, and sometimes it just takes a few minutes, but I'd like to throw out just 2 thoughts for you to think about if this could stir a story for you. Is number 1, have you had a particular experience that reflects that core value of reciprocity? think about that. And then the other thought is, how does reciprocity work differently in a time bank? So with that, I would invite Chris to invite Donna, who has started saying she has a comment and not exactly a story, but we'll start there because so far Donna's the bravest one that says, I want to share.
Hello, Donna. So we're listening.
Hi, everyone. So I wanted to say that in the time bank that I'm involved with, Brattleboro Time Trade in Vermont, an issue with reciprocity seems to be, and I wouldn't be surprised if other time banks may have this, and if not, I'd love to know what they do. Like people who are more active members and leadership and such accumulate like a lot of hours, and then they don't often have enough ways to really, you know, use those hours. So
that is a great question, Donna. And I know that time banks need to deal with this often. And so let's just put that as a question. Have any of you got some thoughts on that? I certainly do myself, but it would be lovely to hear anybody who's got a thought and would like to share about how reciprocity plays out in their time bank. It's quiet. I'm not seeing. So, you know, what happens is you get 2 pages of 2 screens, and I'm just making sure I can see everyone. So, Donna, while people, Donna, the other Donna from St. Pete is right here. Thank you, Donna.
Well, we do tend to attract givers to the time bank. And so givers receive a lot of joy when they give in the time bank. And when we do orientations, we really urge people to figure out ways that they can receive, because many people feel that they're receiving as they're giving. And that's what I consider true reciprocity, because there's both giving and receiving on both sides of the exchange. But, you know, getting people to actually receive in their own minds can be difficult. But we givers tend to receive a lot of joy from giving. So it is a conundrum.
It really is. Donna, you want to respond, and then Pip.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to say, yeah, I tend to feel similarly, but I bring it up because I've heard that from several different people that, you know, what I mentioned about not having enough ways to use their hours. So, okay, thanks.
Thank you, Donna. And Pip, you would like to say something. You're from New Zealand, Taranaki.
Yes. I'm afraid I'm going to dash off shortly because I've got work, but I don't know how it works out for her, but I do notice that our coordinator for our area is very good at putting up a lot of different requests, all sorts of different things that she thinks of that people could help her learn how to do something or practice something or whatever, which I think is great because A, she can use up her points, but also it gives other people ideas of things they could be asking for. So, yeah.
That is such a good point, Pip, because we know actually, one time we had an intern here for 6 weeks in the summer, and one of her roles was just to ask for exchanges. She had an amazing summer, actually. She was getting all kinds of trips around Washington, D.C. and getting to, but what it did was it spurred on like a ripple effect. The people who were making those, doing that giving and making those exchanges were actually seeming to be more willing to accept as well. So it is an interesting phenomenon that we find it so hard to graciously receive. And I think this is one of the things that time banking actually does, is it says, hey, let's look at that. Let's look at this giving and receiving and how we set it up in our society and how we do and don't do it. And it can push against some comfort barriers and things that people need to deal with. We have that a lot. So that was a really good thing to raise, Donna. So Pip, before you go, can you share with us a time that you have received from the time bank?
that was another thing I was thinking of. I mean, I think something that might be easier for people to receive than services is, I wanted to get a particular plant for my garden, and I put that out there. And that was a really good way to, good way to start, I guess, because that was, looking for somebody who had too much of something and I needed it. So I thought that worked well for me. I think it worked well for the other person because it was something that spreads. So,
right. And you both felt good about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
yeah, very nice. Yes. I think that the exchanging goods bit has always been a question, and some time banks have used it often and a lot and found it really helpful. I know that Abby has actually, I know BJ, I'm looking at St. Pete Time Bank has done that a lot. I want to share just a receiving story because I will tell you, I have a very, very messy office, and I'm very glad to have this picture behind me so you can't see it. I despair of actually ever getting it tidy, and it really got to a terrible point. And one of the Time Bank members came by and saw it and actually offered. And I said, yes. And 4 hours later, it was amazing. She, in 4 hours, did what would have taken me weeks of time to do. And I can't tell you how grateful I felt to her. That sense of gratitude was so much. Whenever I think of her now, I think of that episode of her helping me tidy up my office. And I have this kind of underlying bond because she did that. It was so lovely. So I do think this giving and receiving, Edgar often says we start out as strangers and form friendships through Time Bank. It's made Caitlin special in my eyes that she did that for me.
At the law school, I bring in the clients and I ask them to share their stories with the students, and they're better teachers than the law professors in terms of the problems, in terms of what they went through, in terms of what the legal assistance meant. And they really impart a value of what it means to be part of a helping profession in a way that can advance justice. And I think that there are some patients, there are some health systems that bring in the patients because people don't like to talk about their mental health problems. They don't like to talk, but if they can brag about how they received help and how it made a difference, then they pay back to the physician or to the health system in ways that are very powerful. And I've often thought that politicians, if they were smart, would pull in the people whom their legislation has helped, or who could hold hearings and pull them in to give back, to make a difference in a way that otherwise they don't. So I think that we can be a force for change in many ways by enlisting the very people, so that we're not preaching at people, but we're enlisting the people we've helped as our helpers and partners.
So Abby there are 2 people who would like to share. So yay, we are ready for your sharing.
Yes, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Edgar, and everyone. Marilyn said she would like to share a story. Marilyn, if you could unmute yourself.
Okay, I'll try. I'm not real fluent on this thing.
You've done it, Marilyn. We can hear you. Well done.
Yay. So I'm Marilyn, and I'm with the Austin Time Exchange Network. And I just wanted to talk about how we've been around quite a while, but we've been not doing much lately. And I find that when you can get to know the other members and find that you have symbiotic needs, I help people with computers or their taxes, and almost everybody needs that. So I don't have a problem with that. But there's one particular member who's very vocal, and she's a psychologist. She likes to talk to people and let people talk. So I find that just working with her, frequently, it's a way for me to receive. And so I'm she will call me and want help with her computers, and next thing you know, then we're talking and I'm getting stuff off my chest and such. So, and she's very good at posting comments to let people know, you know, this is a great opportunity and Marilyn can help you with your computers or your taxes, and just sort of lighten the stage a little and let people see that it's not a difficult thing. So I just think that's a good way to do it. And we've been trying to get people to interact more and have virtual potluck type meetings and just get to know each other. And even just that seems like a good reciprocity builder.
Mm.
So Edgar, you wanted to say, thank you, Marilyn, so much for sharing that. Did you want to respond to that, Edgar?
Well, I think we don't value reciprocity enough. I think we don't make it explicit, and that to have a celebration of reciprocity by those who have given as a way of thanking them and celebrating them, and even giving some form of formal recognition to their children and their parents, so that their world of relevant approval is affirmed, because if their kids can be proud of them for what they did, that's important, and if their parents can be proud of them. So I think that we ought to be finding ways, almost ritual ways, to thank the people who have done so much. And just build that into how we do things.
Right. So what's coming up in this story is how much reciprocity is a kind of complex thing. It's not just necessarily one-to-one. It is actually a dynamic. It's a flow in our community. And you just brought in Edgar, how bringing extra people into that flow can grow it and put attention to it. So I think there's another person who was in the list to share a story. Thank you, Marilyn. That was lovely. I love the two-wayness of that you shared.
Whoa.
Yes. Next up on the list was Adriana. Hopefully I'm saying your name right, Adriana.
Yeah, is right. Thank you so much. Yeah. Nice to meet you, Edgar, and nice to meet you, everybody here. I mean, my name is Adriana. I'm from the New York City Anarchist Book Fair. I have been doing this for 15 years. I mean, I really recently met the Timebank, what I was a love for the first moment, you know what I mean? Everything I read, I get totally in love with that. And I really like the idea or the possibility to share with you and the opportunity to share about reciprocity. We develop an art laboratory together with Judith Malina. And Julian Beck is deaf, but Judith Malina continue a laboratory here in New York. And as soon as I arrive in New York, I have this proposal for a creative collection art laboratory, you know? And in this laboratory, what we do is we from different medias, we get together, and we just start a kind of collective creation at the same time. That means we stay together for 3-4 hours or 20 hours, doesn't matter how much we want and we need, and then we start to share our capacity, but in interaction at the same time with the other artists, you know, because we think the system of art is corrupt, is totally sold, no? And we think that the genuine art, I mean, where you really, you know, develop your soul and, you know, things like that, you do this in genuine way together with artists that have more or less the same values like you know? And then is experience unique because it's like where we stop your individuality and where you, the collective, and that means you all the time question, you know, your individuality and the collective all the time, you know? And it's a great exercise. And I want to share this story here. I mean, I hope it's not so abstract and somebody understand a little bit what I'm trying to say, but it's about art laboratory that it was the more beautiful experience in my life I had in reciprocity between artists that just there together for the art itself. It's not for money, not for curators. It's just pure intentional art. And thank you so much.
Wow. Yeah. Adriana, that was lovely. Thank you so much for sharing the notion of you coming together and just being together for however long you need, and basically sharing who you are, your time together, and being totally open and free together. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful image. And I think often in time banking, we tend to think of individual exchanges. And what you've just brought up is the group and the group dynamics of time banking, which is so beautiful and so lovely because they are based on the fact of equality and time. And we share our time together. That was just an absolutely lovely story. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
So are there thoughts? Yes.
I was just gonna say, I feel like, okay, I'm just gonna go way out on a wing here, but I feel like I'm hoping actually that one of the very good things that might come out of COVID is an appreciation of the artisans and the artisan economy. And I often think about the artisan economy and time banking and how wonderful that relationship is. That's my thought.
It is indeed. In California, the time banking in California was first started by artists getting together in Los Angeles, helping one another make it through economically, but also in sharing in the way you've just described. That was really lovely. Jeffrey's written, society can better appreciate all the time that artists spend on their creations and not just focus on the art product created. What a beautiful response. Thank you so much, Jeffrey. Yeah, that's exactly right. I see Adriana nodding her head. We got the drift, Adriana, we got the drift. That was lovely, so nice. So more thoughts on either have you received at a time and how has that left you feeling? Or have you been part of a group experience of giving or receiving? And I've got a story I really, really want to share. So this was actually with the youth court that we used to run in Washington, DC. And we got a little grant to help ex-gang members re-enter into the community. And our time bank leader had a beautiful idea, which was to get $250 to a group of these gang members and say, you are going to share food. You're going to go and buy some food, put it into individual things and take it to a homeless shelter. So they did. They got this food, and I'll tell you, it was from Cajun food and it smelled amazing. And I was there when they did this. They walked into the homeless shelter that housed 300 people and they only had food for 50. And it was almost a mob scene because this food smelled so wonderful. But the people who were in the shelter were so amazing how they looked out for one another, and they put who looked to be the most needy at the front. It was an amazing experience. And those kids, those ex-gang members, stood at the front and they had smiles on their faces that as they just stretched from ear to ear because they were giving out this food to these people who were so anxious to get it. And then the following week, the members that had done that, they talked about what it had meant for them to be giving in that way. And they were so blown away by how it felt and the dynamics of it. And they started saying, well, maybe we could give away our, because they were gang members with lots of fancy clothes, actually. Maybe we could give away some of our clothes. Maybe we could give away some of our sneakers. They were just they were just inspired by this moment. So, you know, they knew that they were receiving as they were giving. That was the thing. So, yeah. So anyway, that's my story. I don't know if there's somebody else who would like to share another story about giving and receiving.
Chris, we don't have a story on the queue, but I recently posted on our social media site a quote from a time banker who said, one of my favorite things about a time bank exchange is when I've actually forgotten whether I'm giving or receiving. And I personally have had that feeling because in receiving or in giving, you're receiving. You know, I mean, it's just such a beautiful notion, and it turns reciprocity on its head. Like, it's not just barter or money, you know, it's just has a whole different feel to it. So while we're waiting for anybody to type in the chat, because we really want to hear your story, I do have a story that was sent to us that I'll read, and hopefully while I'm reading it, somebody here will have an exciting story to share. This is a story called Honoring Others. It's from the Kent Community Time Bank and part of the Our Storytelling Project called Honoring Others. Tina, who loves to garden, was happy to receive Kathy's request for help with her yard. Kathy was an avid gardener with beautiful gardens who couldn't do the heavy digging of gardening anymore, said Tina, a longtime member of the Kent Community Time Bank. She needed some things dug up and some other things moved around, a foot here, a foot there. Tina was happy to work for the hour, she promised, while Kathy stood nearby, directing her where to move each plant. This was not unimportant work, Tina said. Getting her garden just right was important to Kathy. Sometimes Kathy asked Tina to move a plant more than once, as she considered balance and sunlight. Quote, she was so grateful that I got it and that I was quite willing to do what she wanted, Tina said. But there was something more than gardening going on here. It was when Kathy opened up about the invasive terminal cancer that had left her unable to work in her yard like she used to. And Tina began to talk about being careful with her hands because she's a musician, and that Time Bank began to work its greater magic. What instrument do you play? Kathy asked. The hammered dulcimer, Tina answered. Oh, I had a very dear friend who played the dulcimer. Her name was Becky Millsaps. Oh, I loved Becky. Becky was my student, Tina exclaimed. And I was her hospice nurse, said Kathy. Tina's eyes filled with tears as she discovered this connection to Becky, a selfless, upbeat woman whose illness and death from breast cancer imprinted on her the value of unbridled human connection. Indeed, gardening would be recorded in the Time Bank log, but being able to help the woman who tended their mutual friend in her dying hour is what Tina will always remember about this exchange. It was so wonderful to have this come back around. Even though I earned a Time Bank hour helping Kathy, I felt like it was an hour I gave back to her for all that she had given. I was brought to support her, to give her joy and satisfaction and a feeling of completion. There was reciprocity before a single time dollar was exchanged.
Powerful.
Wow, thanks for sharing that, Abby. Yeah, no, there are these powerful moments, and being so aware of reciprocity really helps, I think, for them to emerge in that way. I saw that Sheena has a story to share. So Sheena, where are you?
I'm at the top. Here I am. Hi.
There you are. There you are. Okay.
Actually, I think of reciprocity as a boomerang. You know, you think you're giving something out and it comes back to you. And I've established a relationship with one of our new time bankers, and she's an avid gardener. And she was going away for a week or so and she needed someone to water her garden. And I was just honored. And she didn't realize as I'm sitting there watering the garden, which like took an hour, I'm like examining everything and trying to figure out how I can grow this and what. So now I pop in and I get little things from her. She's like, oh, and she always tells me how happy she was that I took care of her garden and nothing died, because she literally eats all year long off of that garden, the vegetables and fruits. I mean, it's just amazing. And so she has no idea. I said, well, it's coming back to me because I'm learning a little bit about gardening. Every time I go there, I get something else from her. So it's like a boomerang to me. It comes right back to you.
That's a lovely image, that boomerang image. And I think that, you know, it's interesting. Time banks are set up to give and receive. You earn and you spend. But so often in time banking, and I think it's something that for time bank members to reflect on, there is that that boomerang aspect of it. Whichever way you go, when you're receiving, you're actually giving, and when you're giving, you're actually receiving, because it's done with that spirit of generosity. It's done with that understanding that you're not doing this instrumentally to get gain. You're doing it as part of relationships of giving and receiving that you've decided to enter into as part of your time bank, as you roll in the time bank. And they're not always like that, but it can so easily be like that in the time bank. So, so I don't know, how are we doing for time? So this is really interesting. You know, last time we had so many people wanting to share stories. We did not have time. And today, everyone's a little bit reticent. And I'm thinking, why are we having some reticence here? Is it the nature of reciprocity that leads to that reticence? Is it because maybe it's a little abstract, or because it is complex, the way it plays out in our society? Or what do you think? I'd love to hear what somebody thinks about why the stories just don't spring up like they sprang up last week, because there must be a reason for that.
Yeah, my opinion, Cheers, is like in reality, people don't practice this too much, you know, because if you practice, you have that like, you know, easy. And that's my opinion. I mean, we need to think about why we don't practice that, why everything's just about the monetary situation, you know. But I think more we do, more story we have, I think.
That's interesting you say that, Adriana, but I'll tell you, I know some of these people who are here, and I know that they live in reciprocity. So it might be the actual opposite of what you've said. It may be that they live it so much, it's like, but isn't that just how you do? Isn't that just how you be? Why would I do it any differently? So, so it's hard to think of a specific thing that you would like to share that illustrates the nature of it. Like you did, Adriana, with that group story. That was so beautiful, that story. And Sheena, you know, with the boomerang, so true about how it comes and goes both ways.
Well, at the law school, every student has to do hours of community service and then share those stories. And it's had a powerful impact on their going into public service law and public interest law, because they're not doing legal work when they're doing community service. They're just helping out. It may be at a food bank, it may be in a public housing complex where somebody needs some babysitting. But the idea that this is part of what it means to be a professional, this is what human service career looks like, is very important, and it creates a kind of equality at the very beginning that is part of the ethos of the school. So 65% of the students who graduate over all these years go into public interest law, which is unheard of in law school.
So,
with a little prodding, I can
yes.
share.
Thank you, David. Thank you.
I don't know.
Okay, I won't. We're not prodding you too hard, I hope.
Well, my idea is I'm still see myself as a novice, and I learn, and I'm really learning talking points, because in my community, I'm kind of pushing we need to get some version of time banking happening. And I may have shared this story here, but I did share it on a radio program I was on a month or so ago. And this happened to me about 7, maybe 8 years ago, but I was working on my car and I locked myself out of my trunk, and it's an old car, and I eventually got rid of it. But I have a friend who is identifies as a lowrider, and called him up and said, can you come over and help me out? And I had been working to try to figure out how to open this trunk, which I had some tools in there, and obviously I needed to get in there. And he came over within 10 minutes, and I turned around and the trunk was open, popped open magically. And it was amazing because I'd been struggling with it for so long, and it was no big deal for him. And I said, how can, I took my wallet out and I was going to pay him, $10 or whatever it was. And he said, no, this is pay it forward. And I understood that beautifully and right away, but I hadn't thought about it again since the last several months when I've been exploring time banking. That was an early example of me being exposed to time banking in a real concrete way. And now he's part of the radio outreach that I'm trying to reach into the Latinx community in particular. And I'm hoping at some point to get on the air with him, or encouraging him to interview somebody with even deeper connections into the Latinx community than I have. And I think there's a good opportunity to create a time bank in that community, because there's already this notion of reciprocity and sharing. And what I like about the time banking is it's acknowledged. It's being acknowledged. It's not just, we're all going to take care of each other, right? Yeah, it's a general thing. But I think it needs to be, formalized in a way, and really seen for what it is. And it's part of the economy, and an unrecognized part of the economy. And I think it's got nothing to do but grow and explode as other parts of our economy are slowly receding into waste and unworthy projects. So that's my story. It's about 7 or 8 years ago, and I never thought of it until more recently, and I think it's very real.
Very, very nice. Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you. So we see that BJ also has a story to share. So you inspired another story, David. Okay, BJ.
I think, well, I could tell my embroidery story, embroidery thread story, but I think in general, like Donna said, we attract givers, because it puts value to what people do all the time anyway, so the givers are always giving and always giving. And I think, like Donna said, especially in St. Pete Time Bank, we challenge people to receive. And there's a connotation in our society of receiving, and how somehow that makes me less than if I have a need. And I think we battle that in the time bank society, because we don't value giving and receiving differently with that principle of reciprocity. It's like they're equal. But I think overall, and I know in my own life, it's much harder for me to ask for myself whether I need it or not, because if I don't need it, I'm being selfish. And if I need it, then I'm less than. So there's this battle all the time of, no, that's not the way we look at it here. No, that's not the way we look at it here. And so again, way back to before I started St. Pete Time Bank, I was trying to figure out what I could do to receive, because I looked around and it's like, well, I could do that myself. I'm just lazy. You know what I mean? I could do that myself if I needed it or wanted it bad enough, or I could do that by myself. I really don't need the help. I just want the help. And when I actually got the help to do this really trivial thing of sorting embroidery threads so they didn't take up so much room in my sewing area, I got a friend out of the deal, because we just sat down and had coffee, And so I think it's incumbent upon us, especially as leaders, to receive. You know, we're teaching people that they're valuable by what they give that society ignores, like being mothers and activists or whatever. But I think it's incumbent upon us to receive, to look around and go, what could I use some help with? You know, what do I need? What do I want even? It's okay to want. You know, there's nothing wrong with saying, I want to spend time with somebody. I want somebody to come have coffee with me, you know, and that's just as valuable as any other exchange. It has no difference in value from, you know, somebody who, you know, really needs help with something. At least that's been my experience.
Thank you so much, BJ. What you're sharing with is that we're creating, and David too, you both did, that we're creating in the community, and we're trying to create communities where it feels right and good to be asking for help as well as giving it. In a society, a capitalist society where self-resilient sort of self-containment is very much valued, where independence is valued. And so we're pushing against the grain with this. Maybe that's why it's been harder to get the stories, a little bit harder to get the stories on this, because there is that aspect of pushing against the grain. I'm looking at the time, and I read that Kurt has a story to share, and I also know we're racing down towards the end. Kurt, if you wouldn't mind making it a quick story, that would be really great, and then we'll get Edgar to close out, and then we'll thank everybody for being here with us talking about reciprocity. So over to you, Kurt.
Okay, I do want to point out that Jed has his hand up, so I just want to quickly.
I missed that. I'm sorry, Jed. Oh, thank you for pointing that out, Kurt. Go ahead.
So let me just say this. My biggest attraction to time banking, like all you are saying, is reciprocity. But the reason for me is 6 years ago, you caught me in my dive into the disability community, getting very involved in disability advocacy, and the concept of reciprocity between the community of people that don't have a disability and those that do have a disability. I saw it, at least from my life and my journey and my walk, that it's very weak in communities by and large, in my purview anyway, in my corner of the world, it's very weak. And so the reciprocity here in time banking was my largest draw, because ADAPT, an advocacy group in the USA, actually says piss on pity, because they're used to being the objects of pity, and it's only people with disabilities by and large are viewed as objects of charity, and just, you can only give to people with disabilities. You can't receive from people with disabilities is kind of a misplaced thought that's all too common. And so this concept of reciprocity in time banking allows for a way to rectify this cultural flaw. So I don't know if we have time for Jed. I hope so.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. It was really powerful, Kurt. And Jed, have you got time to squeeze something in really short?
Yes, thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, just real quick. I may have missed this earlier. I'm on the road. I apologize, but I'm curious if with this challenge of getting a lot of the givers to get in the role of the receiving, if any community coordinators have tried to kind of survey the givers and understand what are maybe the top 2 or 3 ways that they would want to receive, and then kind of proactively recruit either among other people in the community or even new people, those who could help in those ways, to kind of curate things a little bit and make it a little bit more fluid potentially.
That is a very, very, very good thing for to happen. And you're opening up a whole area that would be great to explore. And actually, I'm going to take this moment to say that this is exactly the kind of thing that the Time for All calls pick up on and discuss and share and say, how can we best do that? And just to say real quick that one way is that some time banks have actually got people to become receivers because they actually really enjoy receiving. So they're giving because they really enjoy receiving. And they become like ambassadors for receiving in the time bank, which really moves the time bank along in a really good way and starts getting everybody easy with this idea of receiving as well as giving. I am going to turn over because we now are 5 minutes of. So turning over to Edgar to close us out. Over to you, Edgar.
Okay, well, that's an honor and a little bit of a burden, but I would share with you wisdom that came out of my work with Native Americans. They have a saying, we did not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrowed it from our descendants. And so we're all here in a payback mode because we borrowed everything we have from our descendants. And I think that our effort collectively is an effort to pay back what we've borrowed and leave the world richer for the next generation and the next generation. So that would be, that thought would be how I would close.
Wow, that was so nice. Do you know what? You did that in 30 seconds, Edgar, and I thought we were going to have to take 5 minutes. So we can open it up actually for any last comments about this notion of reciprocity and how much it is around in our society, but also how squirrely it is. It's a sort of squirrely kind of thing in the society that we have. Donna, I see you with your hand up.
I think one of the challenges that we have is getting people to think of the time bank when automatically, whenever they think of something that they might need. And once that happens, then receiving happens more often. So that is my conundrum or
challenge.
Question. Yeah, challenge. Yes. Very good. Yes. Yes.
First, I'd like to say something else.
Yeah, please do.
This gets somewhat political, but it says what we're missing are public programs that enlist the citizenry as partners and that engage. We know that interaction with somebody 0 to 4 radically changes the development of their nervous system. We know that cross-age peer tutoring of kids tutoring kids literally eliminates special ed. We know that kids, when they create youth courts, radically reduce recidivism. We know when people coming back from prison are given the chance to give back by providing secure patrols to patrol the street at night so that seniors can walk safely. So that we know we have the tool and the vision, and at some point we need to get political to say, why aren't you building this in to all of the legislation? Why aren't you building this in as an in-kind match that's required to spur citizen participation? This isn't about just hiring more professionals and paying them because they're underpaid and overworked. This is about understanding that we all know that nothing that paid people can do can ever be enough if we don't do it for each other. And I think that becomes a statement we need as a movement to make to the political system. So that's my troublemaking end, yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Edgar. We would expect no less of you. And I think you've actually just said a lot of great words for us to think about for the next month, maybe a little homework assignment. Great, all of the stories have been great today. And I also want to mention Eric's note in the chat, something else to think about for next month, because next month we'll be continuing with that core value reciprocity. But Eric says, I'm thinking about how we use giving and receiving. Don't we all both give and receive during every exchange? It seems that we are limiting giving and receiving specifically to a service given or received. It's almost like the game within the game, and such a great comment to end this call on. Thank you so much, Eric. And I just want to thank everybody for being here. It's been, of course, another wonderful call. I'm so glad we record these gems, meaningful, important conversations that we need to keep having. Next month, we'll be returning to the same core value. Maybe you'll bring a story. We'd love to hear stories from your time banks. Bring your members, anybody you know who's got a good story. That would be September 19th at 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And this pretty much concludes our call. What we've found in the past is a few people like to stay on for about 15 minutes. It's hard for us all just to hang up. So if you want to stay on, we'll just chit chat around. And of course, Krista is telling us, send us your stories, info@timebanks.org. Stories are what make the movement move. We must tell the world what we're doing. So thank you all. I'm excited for the next month as our brains go, and let's get twice as many people on the call.
I would so value a written version of those stories, or somebody to call me and dictate it to me, because I'm now writing a new book that starts off addressing social isolation. And the first chapter is written, but the next chapters have to be stories about what we're doing. And so if you would share your stories with me so that I could write them down, I would really appreciate that. And most of you know my email address is yeswecan@aol.com.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you, everybody. Time to say sayonara, goodbye, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, all of those. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.